Jide tried to avoid Senior Kunli after that night, keeping his head down, doing his chores without complaint. But it was impossible to stay invisible. Senior Kunal always found him, always called him out for the smallest mistakes. One evening, as Jide was scrubbing the bathroom floor, Senior Kunal appeared, his shadow stretching across the tiles. "Boy," he called, his voice cold. "Come here." Jide's heart sank. He stood up, his knees trembling. Senior Kunal's eyes were darker than usual, his face expressionless. "Follow me." He led Jide to the abandoned science lab at the back of the school. The air was thick with dust, the windows cracked, cobwebs hanging from the ceiling. Jide's stomach churned with fear. Senior Kunal closed the door, his face twisted into a sinister grin. "You saw something you shouldn't have," he whispered, his voice cold and menacing. "And that could be a problem." Jide's heart pounded in his chest. He wanted to deny it, to lie, but his voice wouldn't come out. Senior Kunal leaned in close, his breath hot on Jide's face. "If you say one word to anyone, I will make your life hell. Do you understand?" Jide nodded frantically, his body trembling. Senior Kunal's grin widened. "Good. Now, get out of my sight." Jide ran out of the lab, his heart racing, fear tightening around his chest. He knew now that Senior Kunal was more than just a bully. He was dangerous. The days that followed were filled with fear. Jide watched his back, jumped at every shadow, and avoided dark corners. But the cultists were always watching. He saw them everywhere, in the classrooms, in the dining hall, standing in the shadows, their eyes cold and calculating. Say warned him, "Once they know you've seen them, they'll try to trap you. Be careful." Jide wanted to ask why Say knew so much, but he was too scared. He just wanted to survive. But survival was harder than he thought. One afternoon, as he was heading back to the dormitory, two seniors grabbed him from behind. He struggled, but they were too strong, dragging him into an empty classroom. They pinned him to the floor, their faces hard, eyes cold. "Senior Kunal sent us," one of them sneered. "He says you need to learn some respect." Jide's heart sank. He tried to beg, but they weren't listening. They kicked him, punched him, their laughter echoing through the room. Pain shot through his body, tears streaming down his face. They left him on the floor, bruised and broken, his body aching, his spirit crushed. That night, as he lay on his mattress, his body throbbing with pain, he realized that Senior Kunal wasn't just punishing him. He was sending a message: stay silent, or else. Jide didn't see Say for days. He worried that the cultists had gotten to him, that they were punishing him too. But one night, Say slipped into his bed, his face pale, his eyes wide with fear. "They know," Say whispered, his voice shaking. "They know we saw them." Jide's blood ran cold. "What are we going to do?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Say looked around, his eyes darting to the shadows. "There's only one way out," he said, his voice trembling. "We have to expose them." Jide's heart pounded. "Are you crazy?" "They'll kill us." "They'll kill us anyway," Say replied, his face grim. "Once you see their secrets, they don't let you go. The only way to survive is to break their power." Jide didn't understand. Break their power? How? Say leaned in closer, his voice barely a whisper. "There's a book, a black notebook that Senior Kunal keeps. It has all their secrets, names, rituals, everything. If we get that book, we can expose them. They won't be able to touch us." Jide's heart raced. Stealing from Senior Kunal was suicide. But Say was right. If they didn't do something, the cultists would destroy them. "Where's the book?" Jide asked, his voice shaking. Say's eyes were dark. "He keeps it in his locker, in the seniors' quarters." Jide's stomach dropped. The seniors' quarters were off limits. If they were caught, they would be punished, or worse. But they didn't have a choice. "We go tonight," Say whispered. Jide's body trembled with fear, but he nodded. It was their only chance. They waited until midnight when the school was silent, the guards dozing at their posts. Moving like shadows, they crept out of the junior dormitory, their hearts pounding, every sound making them jump. The seniors' quarters were at the far end of the compound, behind the old assembly hall. The air was cold, the darkness heavy, pressing down on them. They slipped through the back door, their breaths held, their footsteps silent. The corridor was dark, the air stale. They could hear faint snores from the rooms, the seniors fast asleep. Say led the way, his movements quick and silent. They reached Senior Cunnell's locker, an old, rusted metal box with a padlock. Say pulled out a small pin, his hand steady as he picked the lock. The padlock clicked open, the sound echoing through the corridor. They froze, holding their breaths, but no one stirred. Say opened the locker, his eyes widening as he pulled out a small, black notebook. It was old, the pages worn, the cover scratched. Jide's heart raced as he stared at the book. It looked harmless, but he could feel the darkness radiating from it, a cold, heavy weight that made his skin crawl. They heard footsteps. Jide's blood turned to ice. Someone was coming. Sei shoved the notebook into his shirt. "Run," he hissed. They ran, their footsteps echoing through the corridor. They heard a voice shout behind them, "Who's there?" Fear gripped Jide's heart. If they were caught, they were dead. They burst through the door, the cold night air hitting their faces. They ran across the compound, their breaths ragged, their legs burning. Behind them, they heard footsteps, heavy, fast, getting closer. They ducked behind the chapel, their backs pressed against the wall, their hearts pounding. The footsteps stopped, voices whispering angrily. Then the footsteps retreated, fading into the night. Jide let out a shaky breath, his body trembling. They had the notebook. But now the cultists would be hunting them. There was no turning back. They had exposed themselves. They were targets now, marked by the cultists. The shadows of Unity High School were coming for them. And the nightmare was just beginning. Back in the dormitory, Jide and Sei hid under Jide's blanket, the black notebook between them. Sei's hands trembled as he opened it, the old pages crackling softly. The writing was messy, hurried, the ink smudged in places. Jide's eyes widened as he read the first page, Brotherhood of the Black Moon. Underneath were names, students, teachers, even staff members. He recognized some of them, popular seniors, strict teachers, the head cook. Sei's face was pale. "They control everything," he whispered, his voice shaking. "The food, the punishments, even the exams. They decide who passes and who fails." Jide's head spun. He always thought the seniors were just bullies, that the teachers were just strict. He never imagined they were all connected, working together. They turned the page, revealing strange symbols and drawings, circles with crosses, triangles with eyes, spirals that seemed to move on the paper. Jide felt dizzy just looking at them. "What is this?" Jide whispered, his voice trembling. "Rituals," Sei replied, his voice hollow. "These are the chants they use during their meetings. It's how they summon things." Jide's blood ran cold. He remembered the night behind the classroom block, the dead chicken, the chanting. It wasn't just a game. It was real. Sei's finger stopped on a drawing of a circle with 5 arrows pointing inward. "This is their mark. They use it to curse people. If you find this under your pillow, it means you've been marked for death." Jide's body went cold. He had seen that symbol before, scratched on the wall behind the chapel. He thought it was just graffiti. Now he knew better. They heard footsteps outside. They quickly closed the notebook, shoving it under Jide's mattress. The door creaked open, and a senior poked his head in. He looked around, his eyes narrow, suspicious. After a moment, he walked away, his footsteps echoing down the hall. "They're looking for it," Sei whispered. "They know it's gone." Jide's heart raced. They were in more danger than he realized. Senior Cunnell's spectral form let out one final, anguished cry as the holy light in the chapel reached its peak. The beam burst forth from the altar, and, with it, a brilliant radiance swept through the room. The cultists, their hoods and dark intentions exposed, began to falter. One by one, their figures shrank and dissolved into drifting shadows that were quickly devoured by the light. But just as the defenders thought the battle was won, a deep rumbling echoed from beneath the chapel floor. The cursed remnants, the shattered pieces of the black notebook, began to pulse with a sickly glow. A surge of dark energy rose up, swirling around the fallen cultists like a vengeful mist. The air thickened, and the ground trembled as if the very foundation of the school was about to break. Jide, Sei, and Ada huddled close to the pastor at the altar. The pastor's voice rang out in determined prayer, and he led everyone in a chorus of hope and faith. Light of God, chase away the darkness. Protect us from evil. The pulsating energy above the altar wavered for a moment, as if in conflict. In that tense silence, Jide realized that the evil was not completely vanquished, it was trying to rise again. Summoning every bit of courage, he remembered the lessons of that fateful night. The darkness had once fed on fear and secrecy, and now it sought to return through any small opening left behind. In a moment of clarity, Sei shouted, "The cursed book gave them power. It's all in that relic." Ada, eyes wide, added, "We have to destroy every last bit of it." The pastor nodded, and together, with a sense of purpose that united every heart in the chapel, they began to recite a long-forgotten prayer, a prayer meant to seal away evil forever. As the words filled the air, a brilliant white light burst from the altar, stronger than before. The pulsating darkness began to break apart, its energy disintegrating into sparks that floated upward like tiny fireflies. Senior Cunnell's spectral form, already weakened by the light, began to flicker violently. His eyes, once burning with malice, filled with terror and disbelief. "You cannot destroy us," he roared one last time, but his voice was lost amid the overwhelming sound of the recited prayers and the pure, radiant energy. With a final, heart-wrenching scream, his form shattered completely, leaving nothing but a whisper that faded into silence. As the light slowly dimmed, the chapel fell into a deep, peaceful quiet. The remaining cultists, those who had not fully merged with the darkness, were too weak to resist and were quickly taken away by the school security, their dangerous ties to the cult broken for good. In the days that followed, Unity High School was never the same. The dark secrets that once festered in its hidden corners were slowly brought to light, and a new administration was set in place, one that promised transparency, respect, and care for every student. Jide, Sei, and Ada became symbols of courage. They were remembered not only for their bravery, but also for their determination to stand up against evil, no matter how deep its roots might be. The chapel, once a stage for unspeakable horrors, was transformed into a peaceful sanctuary where students and staff could come together in prayer and reflection. Yet, even as the school healed and life began to return to normal, there remained a quiet warning. In the attic of the school library, hidden away behind dusty shelves and forgotten files, lay a small, tattered journal. Its pages were filled with cryptic symbols and hurried notes, a remnant of the dark days when the cult thrived. Though no one dared read it openly, its existence was a silent reminder that the battle between light and darkness is never truly over. Some nights, when the wind howled outside and the storm clouds gathered above, a few brave souls claimed they could still hear faint, almost imperceptible chants echoing through the empty corridors. These whispers served as both a warning and a promise that evil might one day try to rise again, but so long as there were hearts filled with courage and unity, the light would always stand ready to chase it away. Years later, as Unity High School blossomed into a model of learning and compassion, the story of that dark night became a cherished legend. Teachers told the tale to remind their students that every challenge, even those that seem as terrifying as the darkest cult, can be overcome with faith, unity, and bravery. Jide, now a young man with scars both seen and unseen, often visited the restored chapel. Standing before the altar, he would remember the battle, the sacrifice, and the victory that had forever changed the course of his life. Though the shadows of the past might linger, he had learned that hope and light could always banish even the most stubborn darkness. And so, the legacy of Unity High School continued, a story of fear, resistance, and ultimately, the triumph of the human spirit. For as long as there were those willing to stand against evil, the school would remain a beacon of hope, a safe haven where the light always shone a little brighter. The darkness may whisper, and remnants of the cursed past may still hide in forgotten corners, but the true power lies in the courage to fight back and the unity of those who believe in a better, brighter tomorrow. Thank you for watching till the end of this video. Please do not forget to like, share, and subscribe. Have a wonderful day ahead.